Good morning, explorers, and welcome back to another episode of More to Explore. Today, we want to feature the summer primetime cams because summer is an amazing time here on Explore.org, and we're going to feature some of the best cams not to miss, including the Beluga Boat, which I'm super excited for, that we're watching highlights of right now because that season begins this Wednesday. Then later, we'll get an update with all the active nests on Egg Watch, and then check out all the many upcoming events. So, joining me once again to help us learn about the wildlife we see on the cams is Explore.org's resident naturalist, Mike Fitz. Mike, good morning.
Hi, Brian. How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well, although I'm, again, as usual, failing to keep up with all the activity
Yeah,
on
there's a lot going
on the
on.
website. Right. And I hope our audience can hear what we're hearing. There's if you're hearing some whistles or some clicks, that's audio that was recorded from our Beluga Boat cameras. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to watch these whales once again. But before we get to that, if you're new to Explore.org, welcome to the community. And of course, welcome back to all of our longtime viewers. We're the world's largest live nature cam network with about 200 live cameras all over the world. If you are looking forward to the Beluga cams or you are watching other cameras on Explode.org, let us know in the comments. We'll be looking for those during the broadcast today. And much of my attention as of late has been focused on the brown bear cams in Katmai National Park. During our program today, however, we're detouring from the bear cams to point you towards other cams with equally impressive wildlife gatherings. For example, Churchill, Manitoba is a gateway into the Arctic. The area is world famous for its annual gathering of polar bears as they wait for the return of sea ice every fall. Before the bears arrive, however, the midsummer season brings perhaps a more spectacular wildlife phenomenon. Every summer, thousands of beluga whales congregate in and around the Churchill River estuary to eat, raise newborn calves, molt, and find sanctuary in shallow waters from potential predators. Our beluga boat takes you on the water to watch and listen to an iconic Arctic whale species. It's a unique opportunity and experience found only on Explore.org. To introduce us to the beluga boat for the 2026 season, I spoke with Kyron McIver, the manager of Churchill Field Operations for Polar Bears International, our webcam partner for the polar bear cams and the beluga boat in Churchill. Kyron is also one of the captains of the beluga boat. And here is our conversation. Kyron, great to talk with you again, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, no, it's good to see you, Mike. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to the beluga boat season. It is such a unique experience, a unique, for anywhere in the world, really unique for webcams, unique for what we can experience with wildlife. So it is really special. Maybe for our audience, though, especially those who might not be familiar with the area, the situation, let's just start with a description of the species. What are beluga whales, and why is the Churchill River so important to so many of them?
Sure, yeah, totally. So beluga whales, they're a small to medium-sized toothed whale, and they're a part of the Monodontidae family. There's two members in that family. Their closest relative is the narwhal. And belugas, they're known for a number of different things. They're known for their white color. As they reach maturity, they turn pure white. They've got big bulbous foreheads, which are known as melons, and they use those for their vocalizations. Another unique thing is they've got flexible necks. So their cervical spine, it's not fused like it is in other whale species. And so that allows them to turn and twist their necks. And then they're also really well known for their vocalizations. They've got a wide range of clicks and whistles that we can hear from the boat, and it's earned them the nickname Canary of the Sea.
They are really,
And so, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
And your second part of the question there, why they're coming to Churchill. And so every spring and leading into the summer, we see this, massive migration take place, and we welcome thousands of beluga whales into the Churchill area. And so they're coming here for a number of different reasons. It's around this time that they're giving birth, and so we get the opportunity to see a lot of newborn calves, which is really exciting. The warmer water in the river and the estuary helps to keep those calves warm. The warmer water in the river, it also helps with the molting process. And so it's this time of year when the beluga whales are molting, and the warmer water, they think, encourages blood flow to the surface of the skin, which just assists in the molting process. And the river here, it's really shallow and it's got a kind of rocky and there's lots of boulders on the bottom. And so the whales will actually rub on those rocks and those boulders as well to help with molting. That shallow water, it also helps with protection against predation. And so if we did see orcas or, killer whales coming into the area, you would see those belugas retreating to that shallow water looking for protection. And then lastly, there's feeding opportunities here in Churchill. And so we just finished the capelin roll. Capelin, they're a tiny little bait fish, kind of, maybe sort of like a sardine or something along those lines. And the roll is when they spawn. We always see it around this time of year, and they're really abundant in the area. And so throughout the summer, we'll actually get lots of opportunities to see the beluga whales feeding as well. We call them feeding frenzies, and it's always really exciting because you get these like massive, sometimes hundreds of whales kind of congregating in an area going after these capelin.
And the webcam too, it's it's to see the whales well. I mean, it's different than any other webcam that we have on explore.org, because our other webcams are fixed in place. This one is mobile, except for the polar bear ones. Those are maybe the other ones that are mobile too. But the Beluga Boat is like that. Like it's moving around. It's not fixed in place. So I'm curious about what you have to do for the boat day to day. What does the day-to-day operation of the boat entail? In other words, what are you doing to ensure that it will perform well?
Yeah, and so that's been tricky. We work really close with you guys, explore.org, and you help us out. We're in the kind of prep phases right now. So leading up to the start of the season, we're getting all the gear and the tech ready. But that kind of spills over into the season as well. We want to make sure that things are working properly. And so we stay in close contact with you guys. We're also working really closely with the amazing cam ops over at Explore. And so day to day, we're prepping the equipment leading up to the tour. We've got battery banks on board that we have to make sure they're properly charged. Once we're on the water, we're going back and forth with cam ops to do things like sound checks, confirming that the cams are live when we switch the power on. And then during the tour, making sure there's no audio issues or things like that come up. Operations on the water, we've got mics on board, and so the captain and any guests who join us, we can kind of narrate what we're seeing in the area. We can, depending on who the guest is, we get lots of scientists and researchers who join us, and so that gives us the opportunity to discuss beluga science. We talk about the history of the area, lots of different interesting topics. And so we can answer questions in real time. When people who are viewing, they can post questions on the explore.org message board. And so there's that interesting back and forth. And besides, out there reviewing the whales, we're cruising around in the estuary in the Hudson Bay looking for beluga whales. We're also keeping our eyes on the shore as well, because this is, around the time of year we start to see the seasonal sea ice melting out on the Hudson Bay, which forces the bears back to shore. And so we're always watching for polar bears on the shoreline and other wildlife, like lots of seabirds and things like that. And then after the tour is all over and we've wrapped things up, we get the boat back out of the water, and then it's just a kind of, we're doing everything backwards from there, getting the batteries back on charge, we're washing things down and getting things ready for the next day's tour.
It sounds like a full day of work for sure. And where are you going on the boat? How far might you travel?
Yeah, so this is I think it's my 9th or 10th season on the water. And so going back to when we first started, things have changed quite a lot. Like every year we're making, improvements and things and advancing the technology. And we used to have a small Zodiac that was the Beluga Boat. We've changed that since then, but we were tethered to the port. We had a connection to the port, which is a tall structure here in Churchill. And we were limited to where we could travel. We were mostly restricted to kind of the estuary, so remaining in the Churchill River. And over time, as we made improvements, it kind of expanded our range. And so right now on this new boat, we've got Starlink, which has kind of really opened the doors for us. And the estuary is a great space or place to be viewing the beluga whales, but we also see lots of activity just outside of the river. So in the mouth of the river, leading out into the Hudson Bay and the surrounding shoreline, we see lots of beluga activity, and those are some of the areas where we might see some more polar bears. So our range has expanded. There's really no need to go beyond that. We're only maybe a few kilometers or a few miles away from the port and the boat launch. And like I said, yeah, there's no need to go beyond or any further, just because the whales typically are congregated in those areas.
You also have to work with the tides. So the timing of the Beluga Boat tours each day changes. How does the tides affect the boat's daily schedule?
Yeah, so we want to make sure, safety is our top priority out there. There's lots of things going on in the river and out in the bay, and it's really cold water and things like that, lots to consider. And so we operate in a 4-hour window each day. And so that's 2 hours before, 2 hours after the high tide. And we've got like pretty big tide fluctuations. We can get up to 15-foot tides in Churchill. So when the tides receded, it's exposing lots of those rocks and those big boulders that I had previously mentioned. And so we found, it's a good operating window to remain near high tide, which means it's safest to be on the water. And besides that, the boat launch is actually dry at low tide. So even if, we wanted to get out at low tide, we couldn't really launch the boat. So that makes it challenging as well.
Some of the best viewing that we have from the boat is when the whales are following the boat. You aren't feeding them. So what do you think motivates, at least some of the whales some of the time to follow you?
Yeah, we're very lucky here. If you look at other subpopulations elsewhere in the Arctic, a lot of times they don't want to really be around the boats or around people. They'll kind of actively avoid it. But for whatever reason here in Churchill, we're super lucky. We've got all these whales, and they're approaching us. So our operations, when we're out there, we don't want to, stress out the whales. We're not pursuing them or anything like that. But just being out there, the whales are actively approaching us. And I've found over the years, we have that underwater camera, which is really great for viewing the whales under the water. And oftentimes you'll see the belugas approaching. So as long as we're maintaining, a relatively slow speed around, say, 5 kilometers per hour on average throughout the duration of the tour, we'll see those belugas approaching the boat. And one of the things they really like is the prop wash. So the prop on the motor is spinning, and it's kind of, sending that water twirling over the beluga's face and all those bubbles, and they seem to really like it. So they get, up close to the prop, and that's the reason too. You might see in the underwater camera or from past footage, we've actually got a prop guard on the boat. So it's kind of this shroud. It sort of encapsulates the prop. And doesn't allow the belugas to actually make contact if they get too close. So it's, protecting the whales from injury. And then that underwater camera seems to really draw them in as well. So we get really close-up views, and we'll often see the belugas, coming and biting the camera as well, which is pretty cool. But mostly it's just, being there. The whales, they want to come check us out. And I mentioned, they're able to turn their necks, and so we'll see them swimming up along the boat, and then physically turning their heads to look up at us on top of the boat, which is really special as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. I actually hadn't considered that maybe the belugas, being immersed in water, they probably have the ability to sense changes in water currents, water temperatures, and maybe the spinning prop is just like a point of curiosity for them, like, because it just creates a different current in the water. I'm just speculating, of course, but I wonder if that's one of the things that maybe could attract them to the boat.
I think so. They seem to be really well aware of their surroundings. So when you see them, swimming around the boat and stuff, they're getting really close, but they're never, making contact or anything like that. And they do respond, to our movements. So if we're seated on the boat, and if, you reach to grab your camera, people are always excited to take a photo. The whales, they're watching us, on the boat. And so they'll respond to our movements. We have to be mindful of that. We try to be as predictable as possible when we're operating the boat. So just, not turning around or steering erratically or anything like that. And like I said, maintaining that speed, if we're consistent, that seems to encourage them to approach the boat and to come and check us out. So
that's actually great advice for wildlife watching anywhere. Be predictable, do what the animals are used to, try to avoid sudden movements, loud noises, things like that. And one of the special parts of the Beluga Boat experience, for those of us watching the webcam, is hearing the sounds made by the beluga whales. There's a hydrophone on the boat. Can you describe where that is and how it's connected to the webcams?
Yeah, so the hydrophone is really great. I love hearing the whales singing, and so super important part of the whole experience if you're tuning in to check out the whales. And if you're standing behind the boat and you're looking at the boat it's basically mounted on the very bottom corner on the right-hand side, so just next to our larger motor. We've got a little transducer and stuff down there as well, but it's fixed kind of as low as we can get it, and it's just on a little U-bolt mount is all. So it's super tiny. It might be, if anybody saw it, I don't think it doesn't look like a microphone or anything like that. It doesn't look like it'd be able to record sound, but it's specially made for recording sound underwater.
What's the soundscape like for you while you're on the boat when the belugas are nearby? I've been lucky enough, like in Alaska, to be near beluga whales from shore, and occasionally I could hear like a whistle or a squeak, but it was generally pretty quiet. Like I could hear the blows when they exhaled when they reached the surface of the water, but I couldn't hear very much. But I'm curious, with so many whales around you, and certainly on the underwater camera, we can, or the hydrophone, we can hear the whales really well. So I'm wondering what it's like for you on the boat itself in the air in that soundscape experience. Can you hear the whales well?
Yeah, absolutely. They're extremely vocal, and just because there are so many, you do get lots of opportunities to hear them. We're not hearing them the same as you guys are on the cameras. We don't have like a speaker on board or anything like that. But just because there's lots of them, and then our aluminum boat, it does seem to kind of amplify the sound, and so we get a lot of times we can hear it through the hull of the boat. And then there are occasions too, it's pretty neat. The whales will come above the surface of the water, and then they'll actually vocalize, like when their heads are above the surface. And it's a totally different noise than you'll hear when they're under the water. And that one, it's much more obvious, or we could hear it from greater distances. And so you'll kind of, if there's a lot of whales out in the estuary, you might hear that a time or two over the course of a tour, as them vocalizing above the water. But yeah, it's really neat to hear them through the boat. And I know folks who are out there, say on a paddleboard as well, it's the same thing. You kind of hear them through the board. So yeah, sometimes it gets pretty loud.
Oh wow, that must be an amazing experience. Almost like we can, if we can feel the vibrations in the boat, that would be neat. That would be like us, echolocating in a sense, being able to
Mhm.
feel like the whales are doing. Um, the Arctic regions around the world, of course, are experiencing rapid change. The Hudson Bay, Western Hudson Bay, no exception to this. How is the beluga habitat, being altered by climate change and other human-caused factors?
Yeah, so human-caused climate change, it's the biggest threat. They're the biggest long-term threat to beluga whales. And as sea ice declines, this is going to disrupt the Arctic food web. It's going to make the beluga whales more vulnerable to things like predation. I had mentioned the orcas. Killer whales, they're not as adapted for life amongst the sea ice, mainly due to their large dorsal fin, whereas beluga whales, you'll notice they don't have a dorsal fin. It's called a dorsal ridge, which allows them to get in the ice. So opening up those areas, sea ice decline, kind of opens up that space for predation. Also things like disease and human activity. So shipping, traffic, for instance, or industry are also a threat.
So, that we have this really wonderful opportunity to watch the beluga whales on the cameras, get to know them, and hopefully that'll inspire us to take more action to protect their habitat. You're there experiencing the whales frequently during the summer, if not every day. So there's a lot of things that maybe you could answer this question with, but I'm wondering, are there any unique moments or a unique moment that you've personally experienced on the boat that stands out to you?
Yeah, totally. I'm super fortunate. I'm really lucky. I've had the opportunity. I've spent a pile of time, out there on the water with the beluga whales, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And it's given me lots of opportunity, to see, tons of unique behaviors and different things out there on the water. And so I was trying to think, what would how would I answer this question when I have, so many memories, looking back over the years. And one, I guess that popped into my mind was, going back to when we were operating off the Zodiac. And there's a really cool behavior that the belugas sometimes do. We don't get to see it all that often, but it's called a rosette formation. And so the belugas, they'll meet at the surface of the water, and their heads are kind of all pointed inwards in the center, and their tails are sort of fanning out. So kind of, resembles sort of like a flower. But in this situation, the belugas, they also had their heads out of the water, and there seemed to be a lot of social behavior taking place. And they had their mouths open, they're vocalizing, they're interacting with one another. And so we were at a distance on the Beluga Boat. I had two guests with me on the Zodiac, and we're just, sitting back and admiring this, unfolding in front of us. And it was as if a switch flipped or something. And the belugas, they just immediately, they stopped doing what they're doing, and they all started to kind of rush towards the Zodiac. And as they got closer, they kind of surrounded the Zodiac. And I remember the guests I had, they were looking at me to ask me what's going on, what's happening. And I mean, I didn't have any answer for them. I think, all we could do is just sit back and enjoy kind of what was happening. But that's a really memorable experience out there for sure.
That sounds amazing. And I'm looking forward to, the possible unique situations that we could witness on the boat this year. When does the Beluga Boat season begin?
Yeah, we're getting super close. So I think I mentioned, we're in testing phases now. So we always get the boat out a little bit early. We want to make sure that, over the winter, nothing's changed. So we don't have to replace or fix or repair anything like that. Working closely with you guys to make sure that everything's, functioning properly. We've also got things like, there's sometimes training and safety and things like that to, just dust things off, I guess, for the start of the season. Our official launch is going to be July 15th, so that coincides with Arctic Sea Ice Day. It's always a really great time to kind of kick off the season, and this year we're going to have a few experts joining us as well. And if you've folks who tuned into the cameras before, they'll definitely recognize our guests, and that's going to give us the opportunity to talk a little bit about Arctic sea ice and why it's important, for us, for the animals up here, and yeah, no, I encourage people to definitely tune in all throughout the summer.
Well, I can't wait. And thanks so much, Kyron, for taking the time out of your day to join us. It sounds like it's going to be a wonderful season. So stay safe up there, and thanks for all your hard work on the Beluga Boat.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully we'll see everybody out there.
Thanks again to Kyron McIver, the captain on the Beluga Boat and the manager of Churchill Field Operations for Polar Bears International. If you want to watch the Beluga Boat, you can do so anytime. Explore.org/belugas. Again, two different cameras there when it's live, above water and below water. Uh, we did have an audience question that came in from LL Bladed. At least that's how I say the screen name on YouTube. And I can't answer this one, but they were wondering, how intelligent are beluga whales compared to a dolphin? I don't know. I think that'd be a great question to ask during the beluga boat season, especially when they get a beluga boat scientist, or excuse me, a beluga or a marine mammal scientist on board, because they do take live audience questions, as you heard Kyron say during that program. There may be some cognition studies on beluga whales, though, because they have been captured, and there are beluga whales living in captivity in certain places. So setting aside the ethics of that, there may be some cognition studies on these remarkable whales. Check out polarbearsinternational.org, too, if you want to learn more about their work. The Beluga Boat offers us a unique opportunity not only to enjoy the sights and sounds of the whales, but also learn more about their social and family life. The Arctic is one of the most quickly warming parts of our planet, and our observations of beluga whales in Churchill come at a time of rapid change in their habitat.
Yeah. And as a reminder, the Beluga Boat tour begins this Wednesday, July 15th. It should start approximately about 6:15 Pacific. It'll be 8:15 Central, 9:15 a.m. Eastern, as we go with the tide. So it may be, around that time, but we're usually pretty good. And then it starts daily Monday through Friday after that for the rest of the summer. And while we're on the subject of marine mammals, we also want to remind everyone about two other webcams groups on explore.org, both of which provide unique perspectives of wildlife that you won't find anywhere else.
Yeah, let's first go to Orca Lab in British Columbia, where the main attraction is orca whales, also known as killer whales. For me specifically, it's fascinating to watch because it gives us a chance to witness some of the influence of culture in learning on orcas. All orcas live in matrilineal groups that consist of a mother and her offspring. A lot of times there's a grandmother in there as well. And these are stable, closely bonded, lifelong associations. So family is incredibly important to orca whales. Cultural traditions among orcas are learned and passed down from mother to offspring. For example, one group in this area is known as the resident orcas. They are exclusive fish eaters who primarily target salmon, and they can be noisy when they're hunting. There's another group, the transient orcas, who eat marine mammals. They hunt with little vocalizations because apparently their prey can hear their vocalizations, so they don't want to avoid, or they want to avoid alerting their prey that they're nearby. There are further divisions as well. Significantly, orcas can be differentiated into clans with unique dialects. Separate clans, for example, don't share calls, even though they might socialize with one another. So I guess it's like having family or distant relatives from another part of, of the area. Maybe they have different accents than you do. Finally, certain families display unique behaviors. Our underwater camera at Strider Rubbing Beach, which is footage that you're seeing right here, captures the northern resident orcas repeatedly visiting this gravel beach where they rub on the rocks. No other orcas in this area do this. It's a tradition taught to young orcas in these pods by their family members. Scientists are unsure why these orcas rub on rocks. We can't discount there's some skin grooming involved, yet Dr. Paul Spong, founder of Orca Lab, has described the rubbing beaches as fun houses for the whales. Their behavior at rubbing beaches indicates that there's more involved than simple utilitarian purposes, maybe for like scratching an itch or grooming. The northern resident orcas of Clan A are the whales that use Strider Rubbing Beach. They are also a group that endured capture and removal of some of their family members in the 1960s and 1970s for placement in wildlife theme parks. Members of the southern resident whales were captured in the United States for captive facilities around the same time, and their populations have been in decline ever since. The northern residents doing a bit better because there's more salmon. The southern residents not doing nearly as well. Steep drops in salmon populations are a significant barrier to their recovery. And thankfully, the capture of orca whales is outlawed within the United States, and we learned a lot of hard lessons about them from those efforts in the past. So we don't do that anymore. So we have this opportunity to study wild whales doing wild things. And orcas, they used to be considered monsters that would attack and kill people without cause, even though there was no evidence for this. They are skilled hunters for sure, but they've never targeted people. They don't war with other cultures of their kind, which certainly contrasts sharply with the behavior of humans. When we see orcas on Exploded.org, we're watching families with rich cultures and family lives. Culture in non-human animals helps the species adapt and survive local conditions and persevere through its challenges. More and more, protecting biodiversity means going beyond merely ensuring a species' survival. It also means protecting cultural diversity in wildlife. And thanks to our partner at Orca Lab for continuing to work with us to give us glimpses into the lives of these amazing animals.
And up next, if you're looking for examples of course, the stunning summertime beach bodies, we've got a cam for you.
Oh, yeah. If you're looking for beach bodies, this is it. This is peak beach body here, folks. Through our partnership with Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Exploded.org hosts 2 cameras that watch Pacific walrus on Round Island, which is located on the north side of Bristol Bay in southwest Alaska. In the scheme of things, it's not very far from Katmai National Park, but it does feel a world apart from the brown bears fishing at Brooks Falls. This haul out is located near the southern range limit for Pacific walrus. As many as 14,000 walruses gather here in summer when sea ice disappears in the Bering Sea. The Round Island cams are some of the most remote cams we install and maintain in North America, and this is primarily a haul out for adult males. Females and their calves remain farther north as they try to stay with the remaining sea ice. You heard Kyron mention a little bit earlier about how habitat for beluga whales is changing because they are so reliant on sea ice, and how sea ice is a foundation of Arctic ecosystems. Well, walrus also depend on sea ice. They use it as a floating home when it's available. Ice provides them with places to rest when they're not feeding. Ice also drifts with the wind, the tides, and ocean currents. So it's a mobile home carrying walrus to different places to find food and explore. As we continue to force the climate to warm through essentially reckless use of fossil fuels by this point, walruses will spend more and more time on shoreline haulouts where foraging trips are limited to areas that are within swimming distance. Sea ice is especially important for mother walrus and their calves. On the ice, they're safe. They are safer from disturbance. Calves and yearlings suffer increased mortality on terrestrial haulouts, where disturbances cause the herd to panic and rush into the water, which can crush smaller walruses. Scientists also don't have a good understanding yet about how a lack of sea ice might affect bottom-dwelling invertebrate communities in the Bering Sea either. So that's the habitat where walruses are finding their food. And I feel really fortunate to be able to share this experience of watching these amazing animals through webcams. I hope that with more awareness of them, we'll make better decisions collectively so we can continue to share the world with healthy, large numbers of animals like walrus.
And up next, if a pile of walrus isn't enough animal mass for you, the Mara River cams in Kenya might be the place for you, because more than 1 million wildebeests and hundreds of thousands of zebras, gazelles, and other animals cross the Masai Mara in the Serengeti is often called the Great Migration. And we've already been seeing some zebra crossing that's been absolutely spectacular.
Yes, these cameras are amazing. This cam group, I think it's like a yin and yang or Jekyll and Hyde sort of deal. It's either a scene of that elicits feelings of calm, or it's like sudden adrenaline spikes. And would be one of the adrenaline spikes here. The calm prevails more often. There's hippos, crocodiles lounging in the water, giraffes on the savannah. Maybe you'll see a herd of gazelle or elephants at a distance. It's a quiet river in a remote place. So in that sense, it can be very relaxing. But the serenity disappears in moments when zebras or wildebeest attempt to cross the river. They are following ancient migration routes to productive grazing areas. Crocodiles in the river have learned this over countless generations. They know where the animals are most likely to cross the river, and the crocodiles are using their immense endurance and patience to wait for food to arrive. If I was a zebra or a wildebeest crossing the river, I think I would be terrified because of what the crocodiles are looking for there. So when zebras or wildebeest are crossing the river, all of a sudden the river is a frenzy where reaching the other side means relative safety for a zebra or a wildebeest. But if you're a crocodile, it's an irresistible hunting opportunity. And then we get to see, really fun things like this. It's just a hippo being a boss on the river. If you think crocodiles are the boss, they often are. But I think the hippos are really kind of the rules, or kind of rule these watering holes. It really does. When it's busy with zebras crossing or wildebeest crossing the river, it ranks among the most dramatic events we've ever seen on explore.org. During our next More to Explore program on July 27, the Mara cams will be our main feature. I will talk with Simon from Africams about about the scenes there, and also what you can do if you're fortunate enough to visit there in person to have a responsible experience. So that's on our next episode. And thanks to our partners at the Mara Conservancy and with Africam for sharing this place with us.
And if you're a zebra and you survive the river crossing, that it's got to be like a great milestone. And we shouldn't forget that there are many young birds that we've been watching on Explore.org reaching their own milestones. So let's get this week's update with Egg Watch.
Yeah, this is our July 13, 2026 edition of Egg Watch, where we check on the bird nesting activity of our myriad cams on explore.org. This update includes birds that are approaching important milestones in their lives, as well as a supersized fledgling who takes advantage of the parental instincts of other species to ensure their own survival. To help us along with that, we're joined by our bird naturalist, Holly Garrett, once again. Holly, how are you doing today?
Hey, Mike and Brian, good to be here.
So we're going to start with the puffin cams on Seal Island in Maine, because there's been a lot of activity there.
Feed him, and just pretty cute to watch this little guy walk around. So we're going to be seeing this common tern fledge in around, they usually fledge at 28 to 30 days. So fledge watch is going to be similar to that fertility at around July 25th to 28th. And our partner for this one is the Audubon Seabird Institute. So thank you so much for tuning in and checking out the goings on of these puffins and other seabirds.
Hey, sorry everyone. We were having some audio issues just a moment ago, but we're going to jump into it with our black guillemots. Holly, there's two in the nest here, and I know that you mentioned that often with like seabirds that raise two chicks, there can be a lot of sibling competition, and there certainly is with these two chicks. But both of them seem to be doing really well.
Yeah, so with a lot of seabirds, we can see an unfortunate phenomenon called siblicide, which usually happens where one of the chicks can outcompete the other or maybe even kill the other chick. But what's really cool is actually with guillemots, they're pretty used to raising and fledging around 2 to 3 chicks. So we don't typically see as much sibling aggression, and hopefully we're going to see both of these chicks make it to fledge. So it was pretty cool. We got to welcome in July with our first 2 chicks hatching on July 1st and then July 2nd. So some people may have noticed that the eggs were laid a bit further apart, but the parents don't incubate until both of the eggs are laid. And this is to make sure the 2 chicks hatch fairly close to each other, again, to just kind of make sure that they're about at the same age, kind of preventing that competition where one chick is much bigger and out competing the other one. So what we're going to start to see is at around 15 days, which we're starting to come up on this week, we're going to start to see more of the adult-like feathers come in. So we're going to start to be losing some of that natal fluffy down, and the birds are going to be starting to look a little bit more like adults. And then by 25 to 30 days, so at the end of July, they're going to be looking like sub-adult birds. So we'll actually be seeing quite a bit more movement with them exercising their wings, moving around. And then we can expect them at around 40 days. So this is going to be around early August, first or second week of August. We will see them fledge, and then they will take their first journey out to the ocean, which is pretty exciting.
We're close to a similar timeline with the with Tilly, who that is the name of the puffling that's in our Atlantic puffin burrow on Seal Island as well.
Yes, and actually, I was just checking out Tilly this morning. She's got a pretty goofy plumage going on where you can really see some of her adult-like feathers starting to come in, but she's still rocking a really great little afro with her natal down and still has kind of a lot, like she's on kind of in a half feathers, half natal down plumage, which is pretty cute. But some people might have noticed after our last Egg Watch program on June 29th, we had an intruder in the burrow. We had drama in the puffin cam. And so it is pretty common, especially once the chick reaches about 9 days old. The parents are going to start to leave the chick alone a bit more because at this point, Tilly's able to thermoregulate on her own. She doesn't need the warmth of the parents to keep her warm. And the parents are going to need to be spending even more time at sea to just make sure they can really meet the demands of a growing fledgling. And so what we did see is an intruder come in. So we saw a puffin that wasn't Willie or Millie come in, and we saw this bird check out the burrow and then actually attack poor little Tilly. And this happens because a lot of times where these seabirds are nesting, right, like they're in a colony, so there's a lot of birds and there's pretty limited nest space. So sometimes if a bird that doesn't have a nest or maybe had a nest fail, they might try to start checking out other burrows and see if they can take one over. And they will take advantage of opportunities like this when the parents aren't home to maybe try to take over this burrow. Fortunately, we saw little Tilly hold her ground here. And then we did see, I believe, Willie, the dad, come back, comfort Tilly, give her some food. And so it is kind of this thing we see where the parents have to balance their time between foraging and defending their nest burrow from intruders like this. And hopefully I'm working on another, some more information about these intruder events with Sophie from Audubon.
And thanks to our partners for those cameras at the Audubon Seabird Institute. And Holly, thanks for that update. I know that you've prepared, like your schedule originally wasn't going to allow you to join us live for this program today, and you prepared some clips to share about these birds. Do you want to roll with those, or do you want to do it live?
Let's go ahead and do it live.
All right. We're going to rock and roll here. Next, let's talk about the European rollers. Every time I look at these birds, Holly, it's just like they've swelled. Like it was just like a few days ago, it seems like they were all pin feathers, and now they actually have juvenile feathers and they're almost ready to take flight.
Yeah, I think these birds have made such a dramatic change in the last 2 weeks. Like we really, and I think you see this a lot in these cavity nesting birds that once they kind of start to get those pin feathers, they just grow up so quickly. So it's been really cool to see that we really do have now 4 small mini rollers in the box. And we saw these birds hatch between June 20th and June 25th. So that 5-day gap does mean one of the birds still does look a little more underdeveloped compared to the rest. And you can kind of actually pretty much see that even a 5-day difference really, really does make a difference when you have birds that are growing as quickly as these guys. But we are starting to be on fledge watch for them. I would say at either the end of this week or the beginning of next week, start to look for them to fledge. We have already been seeing footage of them sticking their little heads out of the hole, kind of checking it out. But what has been cool too is we've seen some kind of unusual feeding moments with them, where we actually saw the parents feed one of the chicks a pebble. And that's pretty unusual because a lot of times, so birds do have a gizzard, right? So because they don't have teeth, their gizzard kind of functions as this second stomach. And oftentimes birds will eat small rocks and pebbles, especially birds like pigeons or chickens. Birds that eat a lot more harder foods like seeds will really need their gizzard and these rocks in the gizzard to help grind food up so they can eat them. But birds like rollers don't typically really need to eat many pebbles because they have such a heavy invertebrate diet, and invertebrates are pretty soft, easier to digest. So it was pretty interesting to see the parent actually feed the chick a small pebble because it's also thought of that usually the chicks don't really need to start putting anything in their gizzard until they're kind of almost closer to fledge. So that was just kind of unusual. And we did also see one try to feed a chick a whole snail, which fortunately the chick kind of knew that it couldn't eat that and was able to spit it up. So this one has just been really interesting to see what the parents have been feeding the chicks, just some fairly unusual feeding moments, and also seeing some cool large invertebrates come in. And what's cool too is we do have all 4 of these birds were ringed, so they all have a little ring now placed on their ankle, and that's pretty common to happen when the birds are about a couple weeks old. So if you see the rings on their legs, that's they do all have identification now, so we're always going to know who these little guys are, and hopefully that'll help us in identifying them again. And then one more quick disclaimer with this nest, we do often see that the chicks look like they're panting, so we often see them with their beaks open, breathing hard, and so it is pretty hot. Like, it is summer in Italy. Europe has been having some big heat waves lately. But these birds are adapted for these hot climates. They actually overwinter in Africa. So when we're seeing this, the birds are okay. This is how they cool down. And even though the nest box is probably pretty warm, they're adapted to nest in these kind of habitats. They're adapted to nest in burrows and boxes like this. So they are doing okay.
And thanks to Ornis Italica for partnering with us there. The next birds that we want to talk about, Holly, I don't think we've ever included in our Egg Watch segment because it's mostly the camera looks at a feeder, so we get to see a wide diversity of birds there. It's really cool to see, very colorful. But, it's not a camera where you typically see fledgling birds, but you were able to find one, or at least find some highlights of one and some pretty interesting behavior.
Yeah, and as somebody who's done a lot of work in the neotropics, this camera just always captures my attention. And I was really excited to see a young gray-headed chachalaca visit the feeder with its parent. And this is really cool to see because the parent is not only teaching this bird about a really important food source, so these feeders are really important for these birds. And it's also kind of starting to show it how to forage on its own. Plus, I just think chachalaca chicks are really cute. So I was really, really happy to see this one. And then we did see also a pretty cool example of what's called brood parasitism. And this was pretty cool to me. So essentially with brood parasites, what happens is you have a bird like, in this case, it's a bronze cowbird. And so they lay their eggs in the nests of other birds. And then the host where that is receiving this egg then has to raise the young chick. And so often people think of these brood parasites as cuckoos. That's one of the best known ones. But it's actually only old world cuckoos, so only European and Asian cuckoos that do brood parasitism. Over here in the Western Hemisphere, we actually see cowbirds are the really notorious brood parasites. And they'll actually go to some pretty intense lengths to make sure that their eggs get taken care of, to really get out of those parental duties. They'll actually check in on nests where they've laid their eggs. And because, of course, some hosts can recognize one of these eggs is not like the other, they might kick out the foreign egg. They might build a whole new nest on top, and just abandon their former nest. But if a cowbird comes back and checks on it and sees that its egg isn't being taken care of, they might actually destroy the nest. So just kind of a really interesting evolutionary behavior. And what we were able to see here is that a crimson back tanager was feeding a bronze cowbird chick. And then we actually also saw a buff-throated saltator feed the chick as well. And so this was kind of an interesting scenario because so you can tell too the cowbird chick is significantly bigger than either of these birds. And what happens is once the chick hatches, it'll push out all of the host's eggs or chicks, so it'll often hatch earlier. And then it just is so much bigger than the host. Usually it demands all of the resources from both parents. And then it made its way over to the fruit feeder, and its begging behavior of asking for food actually triggered the saltator to feed it as well. So sometimes birds will just respond to that begging behavior and feed these chicks, which is how the cowbird chicks really ends up growing. Is even though the parents all their offspring gets kicked out, that begging behavior will just trigger them to keep feeding this chick and feeding this chick. So just a really interesting behaviors observed at the Panama feeder cam, and just shows you that there's baby birds all around.
And thanks to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology for partnering with us with that camera. Again, check it out. It's really great for the audio. It's really great to see a wide variety of tropical birds in Panama, one of the most species-rich areas of the world for birds. Let's head back to North America briefly. Holly, we do have to congratulate our ISs in Baltimore, Maryland. Our Chesapeake Falcons have all fledged. It's been really difficult to see when they went and what they've been experiencing because our camera view there is a bit limited. But I think we can be confident that all four of them have fledged.
Yeah, congratulations to our Chesapeake Falcons. And yeah, I would say that these young ones have fledged, which is really exciting. But we do still see the parents come back and visiting the nest. So I do think we can assume that the fledglings are likely nearby. But yeah, just not a great camera view to really see them outside of the nest. But I think we can be pretty confident that they are out on their own exploring the world now. So congratulations to our Chesapeake Falcons.
Then in the Philippines, we're still watching Biani, who is quite basically fully grown by this point in time, but maybe has the opportunity to help sustain the populations of this critically endangered species.
Yeah, so it's been really cool to just watch Bayani really just grow into himself, starting to take more of these test flights around. And honestly, just such a magnificent bird to observe because they're just such large eagles. So just watching those flights around the enclosure to me is just spectacular. So hopefully we'll see him getting released out into the wild and helping his species because the Philippine eagles are critically endangered. So just Bayani is really going to be an ambassador for his species.
And our partner there is the Raptor Resource Project and the Philippine Eagle Foundation. Back to North America, our burrowing owls, they're getting bigger and better well feathered. They're not close to fledging yet. I think we still have another few weeks with them, right, Holly?
We should still have another few weeks. We are seeing them really start to look more like burrowing owls. And I think that's what's really fun about this species is because they're really running and hopping and preening around by 3 weeks old. you'll just really start to see them outside the burrow. This is one of my favorite camps to watch because I just think the young burrowing owls are so goofy looking. So they're already starting to play around with short flights. They're doing a lot of running around. Really right around 6 weeks old, they are flying, but still kind of stick around near this burrow. So we'll probably be seeing them expected fledge. We still, I would say, have another few weeks with them. So I would say by early August, we might be having to say goodbye to them. But definitely check this one out. Sometimes you'll see them doing dust baths, just overall playing around. Really fun. Yeah.
And our partner there is the Owl Research Institute. We're going to stick with them for just a moment, not to talk about owls, but to talk about osprey. In Charlo, Montana, we still have a single bird in that nest.
Yes, we do still have our chick that is going strong, growing more every week. And I think this one's going to be similar where we can expect to see in early August a fledge. So definitely keep an eye on this one because this bird is really in that stage where these birds just start changing almost every day. So be sure to keep an eye on it. One thing we have been noticing is that there's a lot of baling twine in the nest. And we did see the male, I believe, bring in a big bundle of this. And this is something that happens a lot with the other osprey nest in Montana, with iris. It is something that happens frequently. And so I know people have asked if the baling twine is going to stay in the nest. And so right now, the nest is at a critical period where they don't want to disturb the nest because the chick is still fairly young, but hopefully ORI might be able to remove some of it when they go to ban the chick. But I think this is a really important reminder to make sure you're picking up litter and make sure you're really disposing of things like baling twine, the like really light, very stringy trash. Make sure you're disposing of it in heavy duty plastic bags. Make sure they're in bins that can't open up and blow away. This fall, as people in Montana and in other rural areas are baling hay and using baled hay, really, if you're just cutting off that baling twine and sending it to the breeze, it is really affecting a lot of other wildlife, especially the ospreys. So just a reminder to really pick up your trash, don't litter, because the birds are being affected by it. And I know ORI actually does lead litter pickup days in Montana. So hopefully, yeah, we'll still see that baling twine. Shouldn't affect the chick, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Really important to understand that, you know, the plastic that we produce, even things like twine, has a disproportionate effect, or can have a disproportionate effect on many types of wildlife. Again, thanks for our Research Institute for a view into the Charlo ospreys. On the east coast of North America in Chesapeake Bay, Tom and Audrey are raising a single chick right now. We don't have the normal view, Holly, for this camera because the pole that you can see right in the center of this screen that is basically the stand for our webcam there that looks down into the nest, that was struck by lightning. So it got fried. We can't really do too much about lightning. We have this alternate view though. So this is one that we use at this location in the wintertime to look at like water birds such as swans, other waterfowl that happen to be hanging out in the area. Overall though, we know that there's at least one chick in the nest. It seems like the other two possibly died, but I'm not sure if anyone was really able to confirm whether it was heat related, because there was a super hot heat wave that hammered this area of the nation recently, or if it was from something else.
Yeah, and I think too with the cam going offline and when it came back online, it looks like there were only two chicks remaining, and then the other chick died shortly after. So really, it's sad to watch, but definitely there's still one chick hanging on. So keep an eye on that chick with this new camera angle, and we should be expecting a fledge for that little guy from mid to late August. So definitely another nest to still keep an eye on.
And thanks to the Chesapeake Conservancy for that camera. Real quick, just a couple of other cameras to remind everybody of, or camera groups where you can watch young birds. Spoonbills and other wading birds, they're hanging out at the, it's still in the trees above the alligators at the Alligator Farm Zoological Park in St. Augustine, Florida. Most of the birds there have fledged, yet we can still see some fuzzy-crowned juveniles hopping between the trees. And yeah, and Holly, you were able to find, I think, maybe some snowy egrets remaining in their nest.
Yeah, I was checking this one out to see who's still around, who's still nesting. We're definitely kind of at the end of the nesting season for these guys, but I did see a few snowy egret chicks still hanging out, and you can really see starting to get those yellow feet, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I think as this one is winding down, definitely I would be checking this one out this week or so because this might be some of the last opportunity to see these goofy wading birds start to grow up and fledge.
And then finally, we have tufted puffins and pelagic cormorants. Occasionally, we're getting a glimpse of those on our camera out at Walrus Island on Round Island. So check it out. Just amazing to see the beach bodies of the walrus. We talked about that earlier, but some pretty special birds on the cliffs there. And Holly, I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your day to talk with us and keeping us updated on all the ornithological activity on Exploded Orca.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike and Brian. Love updating on these nests, and we are reaching the end of the breeding season for a lot of these birds. So definitely the next few weeks, I think, are going to be exciting.
Awesome. Thanks, Holly and Mike, for the Egg Watch update. And as we wrap up our show today, we have so many more live events happening this week alone. Tomorrow, we have our regular AfriCam show tomorrow, July 14 at 7 a.m. Pacific time. And then we have, I believe, the final play-by-play for the season with the Raptor Resource Project to get all the updates with them. And then, of course, as we mentioned before, July 15, this Wednesday, we're going to be around 6:15 a.m. is the first Beluga Boat tour. And, of course, 7 a.m. on Thursday is our regular Wild Moment show to see all the best clips of all the AfriCam clips. And, of course, that's not all because we have, of course, our regular BearCam live events with an event every single day. Check it out. Monday, later today, we'll have the live Q&A so you can ask all of your BearCam questions. Tuesdays, play-by-play. Again, on Thursday, another play-by-play. Wednesdays, the live chat. And, of course, Friday is the YouTube chat for that. So lots of events. Definitely check it out. Be sure to follow the Explore.org calendar. And that's our show for today. So, of course, I want to give another thank you to Holly and Mike for joining me today. And I want to give a special thank you to all of our moderators and camera operators for making the magic happen in behind the scenes. And be sure to come back for the live Q&A later today. And we'll be back with another episode of More to Explore on July 27th. And until then, happy exploring.